If you ever come across Bridgman, you might be wondering how has this supplanted these beautiful old masters' drawings? And if Bridgman is so important and great, why does it constantly need cultists and advocates trying to decipher and mansplain it to you? And more importantly, what? What does this have to do with figure drawing? Most people attribute the confusion with Bridgman to the sketchy notes and bad reproductions his students compiled together as books. Others point to the sparse explanations and felt the huge gaps between the notes compiled and what his original messages might have been. While these might be true to a certain degree, the actual reason that people are confused about Bridgman is the fact that everyone, experts and amateurs alike, had completely missed the one and the main revolutionary idea that Bridgman had on the art of figure drawing. How could this have happened? How can a brilliant idea, revolutionary even, be lost? Well, there are two main reasons his brilliant insight has become lost over time. Firstly, the reasons and context that ignited Bridgman's revolutionary idea no longer dominate the art world today. In other words, what most people perceived in Bridgman today is merely the brilliance of his concept without the full context of the problem it was trying to solve. Similar to admiring a finely crafted katana without fully comprehending the dragon it was forged to slay. Before Bridgman, the prevailing belief among old masters was that humans, being organic, were composed entirely of curves, and therefore should only be drawn with curves and bumps. While this is based on a mathematical fact, it nonetheless imposed a restrictive dogma on art, tying the portrayal of life in art to a superficial surface quality. Furthermore, in the implication of this dogma, it is considered wrong to portray life in art in any other ways. And this is what Bridgman had beef with, the bumpy Michelin Man, and the restriction it represented. Bridgman's brilliant insight came from the departure from this restriction. With the era of post industrialized America and the rise of the abstract, he sees the human as an abstract piece of machinery from which life springs and not life itself. Life of a figure came in the form of actions, gesture, and the twisting and turning of form. The machinery itself is not life, and the surface representation of bump or no bump is now moot. Freed from the prejudice of the old dogma, he was able to open his eyes to the beauty of shapes and objects from the most generalized and abstract places, and incorporated these shapes into the description of life. In his notes, he famously picked the most inorganic, stiff, geometric, lifeless, and symmetric object he could find as an example, a beautiful Greek pillar, and asked his student to find beauty and life in it. And that epitomized his badassery in my eyes. Secondly, the reason Bridgman's insight is no longer so completely apparent is only a testament to the overwhelming influence of the idea he brought about, and the prevalence of his artistic DNA in virtually all of what we see today, from comics to concept art to even fine art. If you study widely, you'll see that this is one of the reasons Bridgman's drawings feel oddly modern and out of time relative to his contemporaries, whereas the old masters are now referred to as old masters, and their styles feel period and are only of interest to those who like that style specifically. In other words, Bridgman's artistic vision had become so prevalent that we're not even aware of ourselves surrounded by it, much like the concept of air needed to be explained to a child as it is not vacuum. So for the first time in 100 years, we can now finally understand his thesis. With that, we can quickly go over its implication and dispel some of the confusion that often plague the readers.
She would never say no because of the implication.
The first implication is that Bridgman talked on and on and on about the interplay and the alternation between boxes and spheres over and over, like who cares? But this makes sense now because these abstract angular box shapes were previously not allowed. You're not allowed to think of them this way.
Indy, I'm not allowed to eat it with the skin. I'm not allowed.
Oh my God, all right.
Okay, I'm exaggerating. Seriously though, we actually do care. The opening of the full shape palette may seem like just adding an additional item to an existing toolbox, but it's actually an expansion of the design space into an entirely new dimension with additional arrangement and interlocking mechanisms. The second implication.
Okay, that was an implication, right?
That was definitely the implication.
Tasty treats? Are we the tasty treats?
Instead of abiding only by the rules of biology to understand connections, Bridgman droned on and on and on about wedging and passing. Why? Because these abstract connections of life parts were previously not allowed. You're not allowed to think of them this way.
I'm not allowed.
With the new thesis, you can now think about the body as abstract chunks and be creative with your interpretation of biology instead of abiding by it completely. The third implication. Bridgman shifted from the mundane surface representation as life to all the things that human machines can do with it. Contemporary to Bridgman, you will not find a life drawing approach that comes even close to the amount of focus Bridgman put on the energetic representations of actions, motions, and gestures. So, why do we still care? I can think of a few reasons. One is the spotty notes and scratchy drawings make a great workbook, like a fun fill in the blank or draw this in your style. You can try to redraw them yourself and make them cleaner and nicer. Personally, I like to do the opposite. I look at Bern Hogarth's drawing, renowned for his bumpy, pimply people, and see if I can redraw them in the Bridgman style. It's a nice case study for problem solving. Bridgman laid down the blueprint for how to think about anatomy in an abstract way, and also provided plenty of jumping off points to invent your own interpretations. We can see a lot of Bridgman in Frazetta, comic artists, and art teachers such as Michael Hampton, Jeff Watts Proco, and Marshall Vandruff. These are great interpreters of Bridgman and should be your companions to study Bridgman. With that said, there's nothing like going back to the source to get a dose of the unfiltered revolutionary idea that he was cutting the edge of art with. And finally, they are just really cool drawings. It's rare to be able to copy the drawings of someone who has something to say with their art and have that idea emerge naturally through a sharp, hammer over the head style. This stands in stark contrast to the usual case of people aimlessly searching for a style while they still have absolutely nothing to say and are only doing it for the adolescent urges of being unique and noticeable. Thanks for watching. I left plenty of ammunition for flames and roasts. Please drop me a few A-bombs before you go.